Before beginning this lesson, you should be able to competently play the rhythm pattern and follow the music on the beginner drum chart for the Lily of the Valley. Today we will learn how to read and play some very simple drum rolls and fills, which we must master before we will be able to play the actual performance drum chart for the Lily of the Valley. A drum roll is a technique that enables a drummer to produce a sustained sound on a drum. The simplest of drum rolls is called a single stroke roll. Today we will learn to play single stroke rolls on the snare drum and the tom-tom drums. For a single stroke drum roll, each hand alternates playing a single stroke like this. As we learn to play simple rolls on the various drums of our kit, we will be following the drum chart titled Drum Practice 1. If you've not already done so, stop the video, go to the PDF folder of the Digital Tutor, and print out the file drumpractice1.pdf. Let's take a look at the symbols on this drum chart. Music is written on a staff. A staff consists of 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a percussion clef sign, or a neutral clef sign. This turns this staff into a percussion clef, or a neutral clef. A neutral clef has no pitch, so the placement of the notes on the staff do not designate the pitch of the notes. Rather, it indicates which instrument to play for that note. These notes on the 3rd space are for the snare drum. This is a time signature. The time signature is a numerical fraction in which the numerator indicates how many beats are in a measure, and the denominator indicates which note has a duration value of 1 beat. So how do you tell from this bottom number which note gets 1 beat? By adding a numerator of 1 to the denominator. Let's say our time signature is 2-2 time. If we take our denominator, 2, and give it a numerator of 1, we have a fraction 1/2. This tells us that the half note has a duration value of 1 beat. What if our time signature is 4-4 time? If we take our denominator, 4, and give it a numerator of 1, we have the fraction 1/4 or 1/4. This tells us that the quarter note has a duration value of 1 beat. What if our time signature is 6-8 time? If we take our denominator, 8, and give it a numerator of 1, we have the fraction 1/8. This tells us that the 8th note has a duration value of 1 beat. Another way to look at the information provided by the time signature is to note that it tells us how many notes of a particular duration are in each measure. For example, 2-2 time tells us that 2 half notes will make a full measure. 3-4 time tells us that 3 quarter notes will make a full measure. 6-8 time tells us that 6 eighth notes will make a full measure. For our drum practice chart, our time signature is 4-4 time, which tells us that 4 quarter notes will make a full measure. The music is divided into measures by these vertical lines called bar lines. The distance between any two consecutive bar lines is a measure. Now let's look at notes. All notes have a head. It is usually an oval shape, but can be other shapes. And notes for cymbal strikes are generally an X. A note with an open oval head and no stem is a whole note. If you add a stem to an open oval head, it becomes a half note. A stem can either go straight up or straight down. A stem going up will be attached to the right side of the note head. A stem going down will be attached to the left side of the note head. If there is only one line of notes on a staff, then notes below the middle line of the staff will usually have stems up, while notes on or above the middle line will usually have stems down. However, there are a number of reasons why this general rule may not apply. For example, on our drum chart, the notes for drums will all have stems down, and the notes for cymbals will all have stems up, simply to make it easier to read. Going back to our half note, if we fill in the note head, it becomes a quarter note. If we add a flag to the stem of a quarter note, it becomes an eighth note. If we add two flags, it becomes a 16th note. Let's look at our rests. A whole rest is a solid rectangle that hangs below a line on the staff. A half rest sits on top of a line on the staff. An easy way to remember which is to think of a whole rest as being twice as heavy as a half rest, so it cannot sit on top of the line but hangs down. The half rest is lighter and can sit on top of the line. If there is only one line of music on the staff, then the whole rest generally hangs from the fourth line, while the half rest sits on top of the third line. However, if there are multiple lines of music on the staff, these may be adjusted to make them easier to read. This is a quarter rest. And this is an eighth rest, with the little knobbed flag extending to the left. If we add a second knobbed flag, it becomes a 16th rest. A repeat sign is two dots in the center of the second and third space before a double bar line. This indicates that the preceding section of music should be repeated. If there is a corresponding repeat sign after a double bar line, then this is where the repeat begins. If there is no corresponding repeat sign, then you repeat from the beginning of the song. You will notice that each line of our practice drum chart repeats. This is simply to remind you to play each line repeatedly until you have mastered it. So let's begin with the first exercise. Snare drum quarter notes.
1, 2, 3, 4.
For the second exercise, we will play snare drum eighth notes. When counting eighth notes, we use the word and to mark the half beats between beats, like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and.
For the next exercise, we will play quarter notes on the first tom-tom drum.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now let's play eighth notes on the first tom-tom drum.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and
Now let's play quarter notes on the second tom-tom drum.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now let's play eighth notes on the second tom-tom drum.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and
Now let's play quarter notes on the floor tom.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now let's play eighth notes on the floor tom.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and
Now that we are comfortable playing single stroke drum rolls on all four of our drums, let's tie them together into a sequence.
1, 2, 3, 4.
This drum roll sequence, beginning with the snare, then tom 1, then tom 2, and then the floor tom, is a common sequence for what is known as a fill. A song will typically have a recurring drum rhythm pattern. This recurring pattern is often called a groove. The groove provides the background rhythm for the various melodies of the song. However, at various places, particularly during breaks in the melody, a drummer will interrupt the groove with accent segments, using drum rolls, cymbal strikes, and other elements to make the rhythm more interesting. These short accent sequences are called fills. The final line of our Drum Practice 1 chart helps us learn to play some of the drum roll sequences used to create fills.
1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and
The final technique we must learn before we are ready to play the performance drum chart for the Lily of the Valley is a ride. A ride cymbal typically makes a more sustained, shimmering sound than the short, decaying sound of a crash or splash cymbal. The ride cymbal is usually played with a steady rhythm pattern that rides with the music. This pattern is typically called a ride pattern and is often the same pattern as the one played on the hi-hat.